Welcome to the GameChanger Podcast with Alice and Bob. First principles, Web3, decentralization, power to the users. A place to discuss how we are building a better future together.
All right, buckle up because we're diving deep into Cardano today. We know it's known for being super secure, blazing fast as a blockchain, but what about the DApps? The decentralized applications being built on it. That's where things get really interesting.
With this deep dive, we're really going beyond just the technology. We're going right to the heart of what decentralization really means when you're talking about real-world applications.
Absolutely, you hit the nail on the head. And we've got a ton of sources today. Forum discussions straight from Cardano's website, a tweet thread that spiraled into this whole debate, and even a presentation from a recent developer workshop. And let me tell you, there are some very strong opinions on whether Cardano dApps are as decentralized as they could be.
Yeah, and what I love about this topic is there's such a diverse range of perspectives, which always makes for a really rich discussion.
Absolutely. We're going to unpack this whole on-chain versus off-chain code debate and really get into how it impacts the future of Cardano and, more importantly, what it means for you, the user.
Yeah, because at the end of the day, the way these dApps are built affects you directly.
Yeah.
The security of your data, your control over your digital assets, the whole 9 yards.
Exactly. So before we get ahead of ourselves, let's back up for a second. When we say something is decentralized, what are we even talking about? What's the goal?
Oh man, that's the million-dollar question, right? I feel like we see the word decentralization everywhere, but sometimes it feels like everyone has their own definition.
Right, like everyone agrees it's important, but no one can really agree what it means?
Exactly. But if you really boil it down to its essence, decentralization is all about distributing control. Distributing that decision-making power. So instead of having one central authority, like a big corporation or a government calling all the shots, you have a whole network of participants, all with an equal say.
So like a digital democracy for the internet.
Yeah, that's a really good way to put it. And when we talk about it in the world of blockchain, it's really about making sure no single entity can come in and control the network, censor transactions, or manipulate the rules.
Okay, so we've got Cardano, this digital democracy. But, and our sources really point to this, things get a little murky when you start talking about dApps.
Right, and this is where that whole on-chain versus off-chain distinction becomes super important. Because you see Cardano itself is designed with decentralization as a core principle. But a lot of the dApps being built on top of it, they rely on code that lives, well, somewhere else.
So even though Cardano might have this super solid foundation, the dApps themselves could be introducing vulnerabilities. I'm starting to see where those heated forum debates were coming from.
Exactly. And you hit the nail on the head. It's those potential vulnerabilities that are the heart of what everyone's so worked up about on the forums. People love Cardano because it promises this decentralized future. But what if the dApps themselves aren't truly decentralized? Then you're just kind of shifting the point of failure, not getting rid of it.
And, you know, one of the big concerns, and this came up in the workshop presentation we saw, is that a lot of the code that makes these dApps work, the actual stuff that's handling your transactions, managing your data, it's actually stored and run on those centralized servers. Like, we're building a skyscraper, but using cardboard for the top floors.
Oh, that's a great analogy. It really highlights why people are getting so passionate about this. Because they're worried that if a dApp relies on a centralized server, then it's still vulnerable to all those problems we see with the regular internet. Censorship, single points of failure, no transparency.
Right. So even if Cardano itself is running perfectly, if that server goes down, or worse, someone decides to mess with it, the whole dApp could just crash.
Exactly. And that is a huge risk, especially when we're talking about things like money, financial transactions, or sensitive personal data.
Okay, so I'm with you so far. But how does this whole on-chain versus off-chain thing actually work in practice? That's where I start to get a little lost.
Okay, so basically in Cardano, when you're using a DApp, let's say you're buying something like a digital collectible, a lot of the code that makes that transaction happen actually occurs off-chain.
Off-chain meaning?
Meaning it's happening outside of the main Cardano blockchain. Only a small percentage of the code, sometimes as little as 10% or even less, is actually running on-chain.
Hold on, so most of the action is happening outside the blockchain. Why would they even design it that way?
So it's all about finding that balance, you know?
Yeah.
See, running every single line of code on the blockchain has advantages. It's super secure, transparent, every step is recorded and you can verify it.
That sounds like a good thing, right?
It is, but there's always a trade-off. Executing everything on-chain can be slow and expensive, especially when you have lots of users, lots of transactions happening all at once. So by moving some of that computational work off-chain, Cardano can handle way more transactions and keep those transaction fees nice and low.
Okay, I get it. It makes sense from a practical standpoint, but it sounds like we might be sacrificing some of that security and decentralization we were talking about.
You're exactly right. It's a bit like, and I'm stealing this analogy from one of the sources we looked at. Imagine you're building a house. You could use the absolute best materials, the best craftsmanship for every brick, every beam.
Which sounds amazing, but probably costs a fortune.
You're telling me. But you could also use prefabricated parts for some of it. It's quicker, cheaper, and honestly, it might even look the same on the surface. But, and this is important, you don't necessarily know where those parts came from, how they were made, or if they're even held to the same standards as the rest of the house.
So we've got this real tension, right, between making dApps that are fast and affordable, easy to use, and building them in a way that's actually truly decentralized. Sounds like a tough one to solve.
It is. It really is. But the exciting thing is this whole debate. It's driving a ton of innovation in the Cardano space. People aren't just complaining, they're actually out there building solutions.
Now, that's what I like to hear.
Well, one name that kept coming up in our research, in the forums, even that developer workshop presentation, Adriano Fiorenza, founder of something called GameChanger Wallet.
GameChanger Wallet, okay. I'm not familiar with that one. What's so special about it?
From what I gather, Fiorenza, he's like a decentralization purist. Doesn't mess around with half measures. Really believes Cardano can revolutionize the internet, but only if we figure out this whole on-chain, off-chain thing.
So he's actually putting his money where his mouth is, not just talking about it.
Exactly. And he's doing it by creating some really cool tools. One of them is called GCFS, stands for File Storage Protocol on Cardano.
GCFS, all right. That sounds pretty technical. Break it down for me. What is that? What does it do?
Basically, GCFS lets developers take all that DApp code, the stuff usually stuck on those centralized servers, and they can move it directly onto the Cardano blockchain.
Wait, so instead of those servers, which could be attacked or go down, the code is actually part of the blockchain.
You got it. It's like in that house analogy, we're making sure those prefabricated parts are just as strong as the foundation.
Now, that sounds like a real game changer, no pun intended. But how does it actually work in practice?
Okay, imagine you're a developer building this awesome new DApp. Normally, you'd have to find somewhere to host your code, set up servers, manage all that stuff. It's a pain.
Yeah, I can barely manage my email inbox. Forget about all that.
Right. But with GCFS, you can skip all that. Upload your code straight to the Cardano blockchain. It's secure, transparent. Anyone can see it, check it, even build on top of it.
So it's not just more secure, more decentralized. It actually makes the whole development process easier.
Exactly. That's what's so exciting about it. It's not just about making dApps better. It's about making the whole system more open, more transparent, more in line with the whole idea of blockchain.
Okay, I'm starting to see why this is kind of a big deal in the Cardano world. But GCFS, that's not the only thing he's made, right? There was something else, GCScript. What is that all about?
GCScript, yeah. Now, this is really cool. Imagine a programming language, but it's made specifically for building these decentralized dApps on Cardano.
So it's like a specialized tool that makes everything smoother and faster.
That's part of it, for sure. But it's bigger than that. Remember we were talking about how traditional dApps use both on-chain and off-chain code? GCScript is designed to bridge that gap. It lets developers write code that interacts with the Cardano blockchain directly with all its security, but also with any off-chain data or services they need.
So they get the best of both worlds. Blockchain security, but also the flexibility of off-chain stuff.
Exactly. And because it's made for Cardano, works perfectly with GCFS. It just opens up so many possibilities for building dApps that are not just decentralized, but also super powerful.
So we've talked about the challenges, right? Building these truly decentralized apps on Cardano. We've seen some really cool solutions like GCFS and GCScript, but something tells me this is just the beginning of the conversation.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about tools and tech. It's about changing how we think about dApps from the ground up.
So it's not enough to just give developers the tools. They have to actually choose to prioritize decentralization from day one.
Exactly. It's a whole different mindset. Putting user control first, transparency, making sure these dApps can stand on their own, even if it means giving up a little speed or maybe paying a bit more.
Which, let's be real, that's a hard sell sometimes, especially in a world where everyone wants everything right now as cheaply as possible.
It's a challenge, no doubt, but it's a challenge we got to face because what's at stake here is huge.
Because if we don't, we're just going to end up with the same old internet, right? Centralized, controlled, just with a shiny new decentralized label slapped on top.
Exactly. And that takes us right back to where we started with this deep dive. Are Cardano dApps truly decentralized? And the answer, like most things, is. It's complicated.
No easy answers, no box to tick. But
Yeah.
these tools we talked about, GCFS, GCScript, they're giving developers more choices, more power to build dApps the right way.
For sure. Think of them like building blocks. But it's up to everyone, the whole ecosystem, developers, users, even investors, to demand better, to support the projects that are truly committed to this decentralized future.
So let's say I'm a user and I believe in this vision, this decentralized internet. What can I actually do? How do I support it?
That is the question, isn't it? And it's one we should all be asking. First things first, learn your stuff. Don't just accept these buzzwords, decentralization, Web3, blockchain at face value. Dig deeper. Look under the hood. Really try to understand how these dApps you're using actually work.
Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions, right? Where's the code? Who controls the data? Does this dApp actually live up to its promises?
Exactly. And when you find those projects that are doing it right, the ones that align with your values, support them. Use their dApps. Spread the word. Let them know you appreciate what they're doing.
Because at the end of the day, talk is cheap, right? We've got to put our money where our mouth is.
Couldn't agree more. Align those actions with our beliefs.
This has been amazing. I feel like we've just scratched the surface, which is exciting, so much to think about.
It's been a pleasure diving into all this with you. Really fascinating stuff.
So as we wrap up, what's the one big takeaway you want to leave our listeners with?
That decentralization, it's not the finish line. It's a journey. It's something we have to keep working at, constantly questioning, pushing back against the status quo.
Don't take anything at face value. Ask those tough questions. And never stop fighting for an internet that's truly open, transparent, and controlled by the users.
Well said. And until next time, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep diving deep.
Join us on social media, share the word and be curious. Stay tuned for more.